Well, hey, my name is Willie Lawson, and welcome to the Morning Report. You know, I was scrolling through townhall.com, and there's this article about this guy in Texas, District 8, who was apparently uh, running for rep, U.S. rep, and the article has to do with this guy's got some warts, and I thought, what is this weird obsession, especially conservatives seem to have with candidates who have warts? Now, let me start with a simple observation that should make you think about claims that are representative of government. Just think about it for a second. Americans constantly say they want leadership who, quote, understands what regular people go through. We hear it all the time. We want somebody we can identify with, who can identify with us. You hear that phrase in campaigns, in focus groups, and podcasts, dinner conversations across the country. Voters say they want authenticity. They want somebody relatable. They say they're tired of career politicians and insulated elites who have never lived a, quote, normal life, end quote. And yet, when a candidate who actually looks like a normal American on paper, when their life includes a bankruptcy or a foreclosure or some unpaid back taxes or failed business, a divorce, some medical crisis, or a season where things just went sideways, many voters just immediately dismiss that person, not question them, not scrutinize them, just dismiss them. The second they find out that, oh, well, this guy had some unpaid taxes, or he had a business that failed. He's had 3 divorces. They're out. So it's interesting, for a surprising number of voters, the very experience that defines modern America, a modern American, have become disqualifying sins when they appear on a candidate's resume. That contradiction is not accidental. It reveals something uncomfortable about how we think about leadership, morality, and ourselves. Now, this is not an argument for lowering standards. This is an argument for understanding what standards actually matter. Because right now, we're confusing human struggle with moral failure. And the cost of that confusion is leadership that increasingly does not reflect the people it governs. So let's unpack what that means. First, Americans have absorbed a deeply misleading story about what success is. Because from an early age, most of us are taught a comforting narrative. If you work hard, if you make good choices, and you stay disciplined and do all the right things, life will reward you. Stability is presented as proof of virtue. Your life is not off the rails because you're a good person, you do everything you're supposed to. Failure, however, is framed as evidence of poor judgment or weak character. Now, this story is emotionally satisfying. It gives people a sense of control. It reassures them that their own footing is solid because they earned it. But it's not an honest story. Because in the real world, people do everything right and still lose their jobs. They follow the rules and they still get buried in medical debt. They start a business responsibly and they still get crushed by market shifts, or regulations, pandemics, bad timing. They buy a house at the wrong moment. They trust financial institutions that later collapse. They get married in good faith and still watch it fall apart. This is not dysfunction. This is life in a complex, high risk modern economy. Yet, when voters encounter a candidate who has lived through these realities, many instinctively reach for judgment rather than understanding. If they went bankrupt, they must be irresponsible. If they lost their house, they must be reckless. If they owe back taxes, they must be dishonest. If they're divorced, they must be unstable. These assumptions are not evidence based, they are psychological defenses. They allow the voter to preserve the illusion that struggle is somehow optional, that it only happens to people who deserve it. And that illusion matters more to some people than the truth. Wow. Second, we have come to equate leadership with perfection instead of resilience. Somewhere along the way, American politics replaced the idea of tested leadership with the image of curated excellence. Now we expect candidates to be flawlessly disciplined, financially immaculate, emotionally contained, and narratively clean. The ideal candidate in the modern imagination has never failed publicly. Their life story moves smoothly upward. Any rough edges have been sanded down by consultants. Any detours are reframed as strategic choices. This is not how real leadership develops, however. Leadership is forged under pressure, and it's shaped by failure. It is refined through error, loss, and recovery. People who have been tested, truly tested, often possess judgment that cannot be taught in classrooms or in think tanks. But our political culture does not reward tested leaders. It rewards the insulated ones. A candidate who has never experienced a foreclosure court or no visceral understanding of how housing policy actually lands on families. A candidate who has never negotiated with creditors and has no personal grasp on how financial systems grind people down. A candidate who has never faced family breakdown legislate family policy as theory, not reality. And yet, these candidates are often seen as safe precisely because they lack scars. We have inverted the logic. We treat untested as we treat untested leaders as more credible than those that have survived storms. Third, shame has quietly replaced discernment in civic judgment. Bankruptcy is a legal process. Now, come on. Foreclosure is an economic event, not a confession of immorality. Owing back taxes often reflects disputes, timing issues, or financial collapse, not corruption. Divorce can reflect personal failure, mutual breakdown, or necessity of escape from something unhealthy. None of these realities automatically tell you whether someone is honest, competent, or capable of leadership. But shame culture flattens complexity. Instead of asking why something happened or how someone responded, voters are encouraged to jump straight to condemnation. The existence of a scar becomes proof of unfitness. This, my friends, is a very dangerous standard. because it tells ordinary citizens that if their life ever falls apart, if they ever struggle visibly, they should disqualify themselves from public life. It sends the message that leadership is reserved for the untouched, the protected, the narratively perfect. And this is not how a healthy republic thinks about service. Fourth, voters confuse moral cleanliness with trustworthiness. Many voters assume that a spotless personal record means a person is more trustworthy. It feels intuitive, it feels safe. But you know what? History tells us a different story. Because some of the most destructive leaders in history have carefully maintained images of personal discipline and moral order. And some of the most honest and effective leaders carried messy pasts. Trustworthiness is not measured by the absence of adversity. It is measured by patterns of behavior, how someone responds when things go wrong, whether they take responsibility, whether they tell the truth when it costs them, whether they learn from mistakes. A candidate that openly acknowledges failure, explains it without excuse, and demonstrates growth may actually be more trustworthy than someone's record whose record appears pristine because it's never been challenged. And but that kind of discernment requires patience. It requires maturity. It requires voters to tolerate discomfort. And discomfort is something that modern politics work hard to eliminate. Fifth, media incentivizes weaponized imperfections. The modern media environment does not reward context, it rewards conflict, scandal, and simplification. A bankruptcy is not reported as a common economic reality, it is framed as incompetence or hypocrisy. A divorce is not discussed as a personal tragedy, it's turned into a character indictment. Bad taxes are not explained as a bureaucratic disputes, but labeled as moral failures. Nuance does not drive clicks. Condemnation does. As a result, voters are trained to react reflexively. They are conditioned to equate complexity with suspicion and imperfection with corruption. Media rarely asks whether a candidate understands ordinary struggles. It asks whether those struggles can be weaponized. And voters over time absorb that framing. Sixth, voters are uncomfortable seeing themselves reflected in their leaders. And this may be the most difficult truth to confront. Some voters do not reject regular people, candidates, because of what those candidates did, but because of what they represent. A candidate, for instance, who survives bankruptcy reminds people how close they themselves might be. A candidate who lost a home reminds people of how fragile stability can actually be. A candidate who divorced reminds people of unresolved pain in their own lives. Rejecting that candidate becomes a way to reject vulnerability itself. If they're unfit, then maybe I'm safe. If their experience is shameful, then mine doesn't count. If their life fell apart, then I don't have to imagine that mine could. And this is not cynicism, it's fear. But when fear drives civic judgment, democracies suffer. Seventh, this mindset dramatically shrinks the leadership pool. When only the untouched are considered acceptable, leadership becomes the domain of the insulated and the inherited. People who have navigated real storms, teachers, small business owners, tradespeople, caregivers, veterans, single parents, all quietly told that their experiences disqualify them. The result is not higher standards, it's narrower representation. So we end up governed by people who have never dealt with the systems that they regulate, people who have never felt the weight of bureaucratic indifference, people who have never been forced to choose between bad options under pressure. And then we wonder why policy feels disconnected from reality. Eighth, voters mistake suffering for weakness instead of wisdom. There is an unspoken belief in American culture that strength looks like uninterrupted success, that wisdom looks like constant control, that authority looks like invulnerability. But real strength often looks like recovery. Real wisdom often comes from mistakes. Real authority is grounded in humility. A candidate who has been humbled by life may be less arrogant, more cautious, and more attentive to consequences than one who has never been challenged. Yet, our political sorting mechanisms penalize humility and reward polish. That should alarm anyone who cares about sound judgment. Finally, we must ask the most important question: what should actually disqualify a candidate? Dishonesty should disqualify. Abuse of power should disqualify. Corruption should disqualify. Chronic irresponsibility should disqualify. Refusal to take responsibility should disqualify. But struggle? Failure followed by accountability? Hard chapters navigated without deceit? Those are not disqualifications. Those are actually qualifications. A republic that demands perfect people will not get better leaders. It will get better liars. It will get better curators. It will get people who know how to hide. A republic that understands human complexity has a chance to produce leaders who are grounded, realistic, and capable of governing in a messy world. Okay, so the next time a voter encounters a candidate with a bankruptcy, foreclosure, back taxes, divorce, or whatever, the real question is, how could this happen? The real questions are, okay, did they tell the truth about it? Did they take responsibility? Did they learn? Did they recover? Did they emerge wiser and steadier? If the answer is yes, then perhaps that candidate is not disqualified at all. Perhaps they're finally qualified. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody. And for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye bye now.